Ms. Kenny, Nick Winkler at Fox. We talk with you about some of your inconsistent statements, ma'am.
DHS worker Jill Kinney, the target of a nearly 2-year Fox 25 investigation, has gone unpunished for her potentially illegal behavior. Her boss has even defended her.
I'm not aware of that.
Can you check into it?
Why would I do that?
Well, tonight we have learned DHS Director Howard Hendrick has punished Kinney in the harshest manner possible. Jill Kinney has been fired. Thank you for joining us. I'm Andrew Spino.
And I'm Jamie Sabetta. Some say Kinney's termination is long overdue. Fox 25's Nick Winkler began investigating Kinney before DHS did, and he joins us now.
Nick, what took so long for her to lose her job?
Well, Andrew, DHS says that Ms. Kinney worked very hard to cover up her behavior. In the end, DHS deemed Ms. Kinney's behavior inappropriate. That behavior includes allegations Kinney has broken a host of state laws. DHS is acting on information we've been uncovering for nearly 2 years.
Ms. Kenny, Nick Winkler at Fox. We talk with you about some of your inconsistent statements, ma'am.
DHS fired Jill Kinney January 4th for misconduct the department calls inappropriate.
And we do not tolerate employee misconduct.
Cherie Powell at DHS will not say specifically why Kinney was fired, but Kinney's troubles began with a botched sexual harassment investigation at the medical examiner's office.
We'd never hire her again. I can say that 100%. We sure wouldn't.
Afterward, Kinney is accused of sexually harassing the very workers she was paid to investigate. Separately, lawyers say Kinney then illegally leaked private grand jury testimony and tried to personally profit from it all.
She was very good at hiding her activities, and many people weren't aware of all of the things that she was involved with.
When we became aware, Kinney destroyed documentation Fox 25 requested, which may have violated state law. We told her boss, DHS Director Howard Hendrick, but he defended Kinney.
She didn't use her DHS email account.
Sir, I have her DHS email.
But not with any medical examiner's information on it.
Yes, sir.
It took a year, but Hendrick and DHS now agree. The department used tax dollars to hire forensic computer specialists to retrieve the documents Kinney deleted. DHS will not say how much it cost taxpayers, but does say the findings led to Kinney's firing.
In Howard's defense, too, that at the time all of this was going on, no one was aware of what she was doing.
At Kinney's home, where she lives with her cats, her can collection, and her no trespassing sign, no one came to the door. And it appears Kinney is without a working vehicle, though she no longer needs one for work at DHS.
And we do not tolerate the type of activities that Ms. Kinney was involved in.
If Kinney's behavior was so egregious that she was fired, we asked DHS whether it had referred the matter to a law enforcement agency for investigation. And Andrew and Jamie, DHS could not immediately tell us whether she is being criminally investigated or not.
Now, the Attorney General's office was considering using her as a witness in a rape trial. Is that still on the table?
We're not sure. We called the Attorney General's office, but at this point, we're still waiting on a response. Guys?
Fox 25's Nick Winkler. Great work.
Thank you.
A 2-month Fox 25 investigation helps send a serial sex offender back to jail.
During our investigation, we also uncovered evidence hundreds of other sex offenders may be violating the terms of their probation in a different way. But Fox 25's Nick Winkler found out it's likely none of them will be sent back to prison. It's an investigation you'll see only on Fox. Nick.
The sex offender we caught violating his probation may ultimately have to serve 8 years in prison, but other sex offenders violating a judge's orders may not be punished at all because of state budget cuts.
Warrant came down today.
With guns in hand, Pottawatomie County's warrant team moves quickly.
Got a warrant for your arrest, Gene. How for?
They're arresting registered sex offender Gene Burrows at his home in Shawnee.
Oh. Will you tell my wife to come here a minute, please?
For something we caught him doing 2 months earlier. In September, we found Burrows riding a lawnmower with a little girl in his lap. We came across Burrows by accident while covering an unrelated story nearby. When we realized he was a sex offender and saw children at his home, we pulled his court file and found he had been convicted of exposing himself to several children at a park. Burrows is out of prison on probation and not allowed to be around children. So when we saw him with the little girl again, we asked him about it.
Camera for, dude.
We're trying to figure out why you had a little girl on your lap.
Before a probation officer could come and check on Burrows, a man pulls up. He drapes a blanket over the little girl, carries her out of the house, and puts her inside a truck. He says he's related to Burrows.
This is my dad, so it don't matter.
It's your dad. It's okay for your dad to be a sex offender and have your daughter on his lap. You're okay with that?
The man will not tell us why he's leaving so suddenly or where he's taking the little girl.
Are you all taking that little girl away so Mr. Burrows doesn't go back to prison?
Burrows' probation officer saw our report and the following day filed his own, asking the state to revoke Burrows' probation. Court records also indicate Burrows had violated his probation earlier in the year by no longer attending court-ordered sex offender counseling.
We had to start looking at areas to cut.
Turns out, Jerry Massey at the Department of Corrections says the state cut all funding for sex offender counseling due to a $40 million budget deficit. In the last 4 years, though, the state has spent nearly $300,000 counseling more than 600 indigent sex offenders like Burrows, but the state can no longer afford to do so.
Most of them are required to go to treatment by their rules, conditions of probation, so obviously they'll have to find a way to pay for that on their own.
But what if they cannot? 1,037 sex offenders are now supposed to pay for their own counseling. If they do not, will all of them be thrown back in prison?
I don't think we can legally put them in prison for something they cannot complete because there's no money for it.
Pottawatomie County District Attorney Richard Smotherman says the state must find an alternative to counseling.
Either that or we're going to have to bring them back in before the court and adjust their probation. We can't have them in clear violation.
But does allowing sex offenders to stop counseling without going to prison increase the risk they'll reoffend?
I'm not going to tell you it doesn't increase the potential that they may do something.
Brenda Carter counsels sex offenders, says only the most deviant, which make up about 13% of the sex offender population, are likely to commit another sex crime. Those who stop treatment, she says, are likely jobless, homeless, and only willing to commit crimes to survive. Overall, though, Carter says most want treatment and find money for it.
For the majority of them, cutting the funding, they still attend. I still have a significant number of men who do attend treatment and pay their own way. I do have someone that are living on the street, some of them that are living on the street and they have no funds, period, but they're still attending treatment.
Carter is counseling some of them for free. It makes no difference, though, in Burrows' case. He's being arrested for having the little girl in his lap.
Mr. Burrows, did you do anything inappropriate with that little girl?
You and your punk.
You know that's against your probation, the terms of your sir. Is that all you have to say?
That's all I got to say to you. Maggot mother.
Burrows served just a year and a half of his 10-year sentence. It's the second time he has been convicted of indecent exposure.
Mr. Burrows, how do they normally treat sex offenders in prison? Burrows is scheduled to go before a judge and learn his fate December 1st. Sources say the little girl he had on his lap is safe. Separately, we called several key lawmakers to see whether they'd be working to find money for sex offender counseling. None agreed to speak with us, though. Michael.
Nick Winkler, thank you. Pottawatomie County deputies also arrested Burrows' wife, Pat. She kicked Nick as he questioned her husband. Take a look.
Pat! God, you get the half right now.
You're under arrest, ma'am.
Put your hands behind your back.
Let me go put this
No,
stuff.
ma'am,
Hey, don't touch my wrist! Don't touch my wrist!
You are under
It's
arrest, ma'am.
Okay.
You should have thought about that before you start kicking people.
Patricia Burrows has been charged with assault and battery. She spent a night in jail, but is out now.
Up front at 9:30 tonight, a mother accused of allowing her daughters to be raped and molested repeatedly is not in any trouble.
After a 3-month investigation, Fox 25's Nick Winkler confronts the mother and the former prosecutor who did not charge her with a crime. It's a story you'll see only on Fox.
Court records indicate the 5-year-old rape victim and her sisters repeatedly told their mother they were being hurt, but the girls say their mother did nothing to stop the abuse. State law says that's a crime, but the prosecutor in the case does not. Ms. Higgins, it's Nick Winkler at Fox 25. Could we talk with you about your children real quick?
Yeah.
Terry Higgins says her 5-year-old daughter, who was nearly raped to death, is a liar.
Well, I took her to the hospital like I was supposed to.
She was nearly bleeding to death. Higgins married Dwayne Emery, the man who raped her daughter, when he was 16. Sorry for what you've done, sir? Emery was convicted of raping the girl last year and is serving 13 and a half years in prison.
I did not commit this crime. You pleaded no contest, though. This girl needed emergency surgery and almost bled to death. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't the only one in the house.
Court records in Emery's case indicate the 5-year-old rape victim and her sisters told Higgins Emery was hurting them prior to the rape. And they say they told you, please, Mommy, help us.
No.
But instead of protecting her daughters, the girls say Higgins told them to blame each other for the rape. If not, the girls say Higgins told them their dog would be taken away. In another instance, the girls say Higgins threatened to call police about Emery, but never did.
Wayne Emery case. Okay, I got no comment.
Kay County's former district attorney, Mark Gibson, prosecuted the case. It would not speak with us about it at the time, so we confronted him outside the courthouse in Pauls Valley, where he works now.
Could you tell us why the mother of those little girls wasn't charged with a crime?
Because there's no evidence she committed one.
State law says if a parent knows or reasonably should know their child is being hurt and allows it, the parent is guilty of enabling child abuse and can be sentenced to life in prison.
There are multiple occasions in here where the little girls say that they told Mom, and Mom even threatened Dwayne that she was going to call police.
Let me tell you something, Nick. If I was going to make a statement, I'd make it to any reporter in the state but you. Now and forever. Okay?
Why doesn't this constitute enabling, sir?
Gibson suggests the girls do not reference when they told their mother of the abuse and says there's no evidence to support the girls' statements.
It sounds to me like somebody may have gotten away with crime.
Defense attorney Billy Bach was not involved in the case, but questions how Gibson could consider the girls' statements credible when prosecuting Emery, but suddenly not so credible when it comes to their mother.
But if what those girls are saying was corroborated by physical evidence, that's crazy to me that then they would say, well, that wasn't reliable enough for us to go after Mom, but by God, what they said about Dad came true.
Before Emery's plea deal, which convicted him of just one count of rape, Gibson had initially charged Emery with raping and molesting the 5-year-old sisters, based in part on the girls' statements.
Do you think you were a good mother, a fit mother?
Yeah, I was. I provided everything they needed. And then the one
Except to keep them from being raped and molested repeatedly.
Okay, now you're accusing me, so I'm done.
No, I'm not accusing you, ma'am. There are just a whole host of people who believe that you enabled your daughters to be raped and molested multiple times.
No, I didn't do any of that.
Emery is the second man serving prison time for hurting Higgins' children. In 2008, Harrison Dogema was convicted of shaking Higgins' 2-month-old son so hard the baby's skull fractured. As for prosecutor Gibson, he rolls down his window, but instead of talking further about the case, he makes an unprofessional comment before driving off.
Sir, do you think this is one reason why you're an ex-district attorney?
Oh, no, it's not. Absolutely not.
Kay County's new district attorney, Brian Hermanson, tells us he has reviewed Emery's case and says at this time there's not enough evidence to charge Higgins with a crime. Andrew?
All right, Nick Winkler, thank you. Higgins no longer has custody of her daughters. They've been adopted, and their counselor says they are now in a